Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm the Public Services Librarian at the Middlebury Library, and I'm here today with my assistant David. And we are going to make some sauerkraut today. So we're going to show you how to do that, and we're going to talk a little bit about fermented foods. So you probably eat a lot of fermented foods already. Fermented foods have gained a lot of popularity in recent years because it turns out there's a lot of health benefits to eating fermented foods. So you probably recognize some of these foods, and maybe it's one of your favorite foods. All of these foods that I'm about to mention are fermented. So we got yogurt, cheese, sour cream, kefir, or kefir, is that how you say that?
Kefir.
Anyways, yeah. Bread, sauerkraut, of course, which we're going to make today. Kimchi, which is kind of similar to sauerkraut. Pickles, soy sauce, vinegar, tempeh, dosa, kombucha, beer, and wine. So all of those foods are fermented. We're going to just show you how to make sauerkraut today.
All right, so the next step in making sauerkraut is getting your ingredients together. So very important ingredient is cabbage. You can get this at pretty much any store in this area, and it doesn't really matter the size of it. We'll deal with that in a little bit. So cabbage, and you also want to get some salt, preferably kosher salt or sea salt. You will want to avoid any kind of table salt that includes any iodine, or as it will be labeled iodized salt. In addition to these two ingredients, you'll be needing some kind of container to be able to put your sauerkraut to ferment in. You'll also, it would be somewhat of a good idea to have a scale, but it's not required. And it's good to have a nice big bowl. It doesn't necessarily have to be glass at this point, but a nice heavy one is nice. And if you got something in the shop, you can make a little
mallet.
A little thing to push down the sauerkraut, and we'll get into that later. Sharp knife and a good cutting board.
Cool. All right, so let me talk to you a little bit about the history of fermentation, because it's a type of food that has a long history. Humans actually have been fermenting food for thousands and thousands of years. So the earliest evidence of fermentation is from about 7000 BC in China, when people invented a beer-like drink called kui. I don't know if that's the right way to pronounce that word, but it's Kui. And that drink was made out of rice, honey, grapes, and hawthorn, and it was kind of the first evidence of fermentation. Then in the next thousands of years, all over the world, in different parts of the world, people were developing different kinds of fermented foods. So you've got beer and pickles in the Middle East, leavened bread, cheese, and yogurt in Egypt, and then vegetables and kombucha in China. Fermenting was originally used to preserve foods before we had kind of modern refrigerators, so that food would last longer, because the process of fermentation actually preserves it, so you don't need to keep it cold. Fermentation also can break down compounds, so people used it to kind of make foods edible that would otherwise be poisonous. And Louis Pasteur was the first person actually to understand how fermentation works scientifically, when he discovered in 1856 that yeast consumes sugar and transforms it into ethanol or acid, which acts as a preservative. So that's just a quick bit about the history of fermentation.
All right, so let's get ready to chop it up. So just give a quick rinse to your cabbage. So rinse. It's kind of hard to really get it all done. If there are any kind of bad looking leaves, you just want to take those off and peel them back. So this is what you're left with after your quick wash. What we're going to do is we're just going to chop it right in half.
Don't cut yourself.
Hope that wasn't too loud for the camera. And then on here, you'll see that you'll have the cabbage on the top part, and then you'll have this little heart. We're going to cut out the heart. Done. There's a little bit more. Let's chop it off there. All right, so now that we have the heart out, it's now going to be up to chopping it up into the size that you like. This is a point in time where you can decide if you want really chunky sauerkraut or if you want slightly more fine sauerkraut. I particularly like mine a little bit more fine, so I can scrunch it up on some hot dogs or some sausages on the grill. So I'm just going to chop it up real quick here. Careful not to cut your fingers.
So you're just kind of cutting the cross section there.
Yeah, just cutting cross section. The leaves of the sauerkraut go from the inside out. So you can see here, I'm just going to pull it apart like that. It's nice when it's like that because as they get fermented, they're going to loosen up and become kind of really, really soft and malleable.
So just kind of cut up the whole cabbage like that. We're going to go ahead and do this, and then we'll get back to you in a second.
All right, so we got it all chopped up. Got it how we like it. Now we're gonna weigh it. I got a scale over here and this big bowl to weigh it on. I'm gonna add the cabbage in there to get the weight. Comes out to 1,080 grams. So if we're gonna get 2% from that, we're gonna multiply that number, 1,080 grams by 0.02. Comes out to be about 21 grams. So that's what we're going to use for salt.
So whatever the weight is of the cabbage, you want to use 2% of that in salt, right?
Correct.
All right.
So we're going to get the weight for the salt. I'm going to grab a little bowl. Like this one right here. We're going to just put it on top of the scale as well. Now we're going to add the salt. And what are we going for?
We're going for 21 grams, right?
Grams. Well, let's see if you're paying attention.
I was paying attention.
Right. So we got 21 grams of salt right here.
Okay.
We're just going to add it in. What I like to do is I'll add half of the salt now. And then I'll go in with my hands a little bit, start massaging it in, like mix it around a little bit so the salt gets well incorporated. Do that again, a little bit more.
Your hands are clean, right?
Yeah, I washed them. I think you saw me wash them.
Yeah, just make sure.
Okay, so there's that. And then you want to add the rest of the salt.
All right.
And then one of the good things about massaging it well and getting really in there, you want to get your stress out with it because it's going to definitely help bruise the cabbage, which is going to help the salt get in there and release moisture.
And why do you use salt? What's the salt doing?
So it's creating an environment for the lactobacteria.
Okay.
And it's also releasing water from the cabbage.
Okay.
So just like when you're drying meat, you want to take moisture out of the cabbage and replace it with salt as a curing agent, as a preservative. So already this cabbage with 30 seconds of massaging and just like going at it, it's already looking like it's wilting a little bit, and that's a great sign.
Yeah.
You just want to continue doing it for a little while longer, maybe another minute or so. And then you'll see with 5 minutes after that, if you just leave it, you begin to see a lot of water at the bottom. That's a good sign.
So do you need to keep doing this for 5 minutes, or can you just leave it?
No, you can just, after you do it for a good, long, frustrating minute,
Yeah.
and then that should be good.
All right.
You'll definitely see it.
Okay. So we'll get back to you in a minute. So I know I mentioned at the beginning that fermentation has a lot of health benefits. So I wanted to just, while he's still over here massaging it, talk to you a little bit about that. So we have 36,000 species of bacteria living in our gut. And all of those bacteria actually help us with digestion. And fermentation is key because it kind of enhances all of that good bacteria in our food. The good bacteria we call probiotics. So probiotics are especially good at breaking foods down, which makes food easier to digest. And this is especially true for people with allergies to different kinds of foods. That kind of fermentation or breaking it down really helps with digestion for those foods that they might be allergic to. And fermented foods can also help the immune system. So foods with a lot of probiotics kind of build up the lining of the gut, and that it helps you sort of fight off disease. The other thing is that fermented foods are especially beneficial if you've just taken a round of antibiotics, because antibiotics can kill a lot of that good bacteria in your gut. And eating fermented foods kind of helps restore that good bacteria and keep you healthy. So let's see, how is it looking now after you've been kind of massaging it? Does it still need a few minutes?
There's a few more minutes, but you'll definitely see this. When we first started off, this amount of cabbage was about that big, almost overflowing. And just with the 2 minutes, 3 minutes that we've just been hanging out here, it's already gone down to pretty much half. Definitely see a little bit of water kind of showing in here at the bottom. Just a few more minutes and we'll actually see a lot more water.
Okay, so we'll get back to you in a couple minutes.
All right, so we've been waiting a little bit here with sauerkraut. Something I also wanted to mention during this period, if you're wanting a sauerkraut with a particular flavor, say you want to add caraway seeds, coriander, peppers, garlic, cumin seed, whichever one you want to add, you can add that now. It's up to you what your preference is. And then you'd be mixing it around. I would probably say, if this is your first time making sauerkraut, to just try the basic one with just salt and cabbage and see how that is after a while, because the fermentation process is going to add some flavors as well. So give it a shot. And if you want to add something on another batch, then by all means, go ahead. Just as a demonstration, so I've only added cabbage and salt to this and just massaged it a lot. So,
and it's been what, like 10 or 15 minutes maybe? Yeah.
So that liquid is all coming from the cabbage, and we like to see that. So next step in this process is you're going to want to be able to put it into a container. You want a non-reactive container, so non-reactive being something that isn't metal or something that would react with slightly acidic compounds. So good strategies for that will be a crock, like a ceramic crock. You can get these pretty much anywhere, or a glass jar like this one with a rubber gasket on it. Whichever one you use, it's always good to have the right amount of product in each one of them. I'm going to actually use this jar, so I'll just get it filled up right here, and you can just do it by hand. It may be a little bit of a messy process, but that's fine. So you just want to add it. You want to include all the liquid too. So we're going to put it in there.
Yeah, that's a lot of liquid.
A lot of liquid, and when we started off, we saw that the cabbage was
enormous.
1 kilogram in weight, a little over a kilogram. And this is all fitting into a 32 ounce jar.
Yeah.
Add liquid in there. All right, and this kind of fermentation, sauerkraut fermentation, is an anaerobic fermentation. It's happening with lactobacteria. There probably are some yeast in there also, just from the natural surrounding and being on the cabbage itself. But what this fermentation process requires is low oxygen. And that's why it's called anaerobic fermentation. So with your little mallet, you just want to be able to press down and get all the air bubbles out. As many as you can. Just going to press it down.
So with low oxygen, with this anaerobic fermentation, you want to seal it well, or you want it to be pretty moist, or how do you kind of make sure that oxygen is not getting in there?
Yeah, so there's a few strategies that you can use. One strategy is you can get some plastic wrap.
Okay.
And you can, cut out a square or a circle and just put that plastic wrap on top of the cabbage. And then you can put some kind of weight on it. If you have a little bowl like this, you can put it on there if it fits. But what I actually like doing is using a sandwich bag. And what you do is you fill the sandwich bag up with water. Yeah. But an important key thing to use if you're going to be using this sandwich bag is also put some salt in it. You want to make salt water. And the reason you want to make salt water is if there's any kind of leak, tear in the bag, what's going to leak into your sauerkraut is going to be salt water. It's already salty.
Yeah.
If you just put water in here, it's going to dilute the amount of salt that's in there.
Gotcha.
And affect the end product. So again, you just want to, I'm not too cautious about how much salt I'm using. I just want to make sure that it tastes like salt water. Mm-hmm. Does it taste like salt water now?
Not yet.
Okay. I'm just going to add a little bit of salt.
Okay.
Like that. Seal it up. Mix it around so it's nice and combined. And the nice thing about this is that it creates weight. It also creates a seal because this is going to be laying on top of it, and it's going to fan out and cover the areas that are needed. So essentially like this.
Yeah.
So you'll want, as the fermentation process goes, there is going to be water that comes up from here, and this sandwich bag, I'll probably fix it a little bit so it just covers a little bit better. So this is this whole series is about is fermentation. So what's ultimately going to be released from here in this anaerobic fermentation is going to be CO2. So you do not want to close this tightly. If you do close this tightly, you will want to burp it every day. Burp it just basically means you're going to come over and say it's sealed, you're taking it out in the morning, or it's out here. You just want to just pop it. And you'll hear a pss, or as if you're opening up a pop bottle, it's going to go something along those lines. I'm kind of a lazy fermenter, and I really don't like to have additional things that I need to do throughout the day. So, what?
A rebel?
I'm a rebel. I'm a rebel like that. So instead, in something like this, where there's a lid, I'll just use a rubber band. And what I'll do is I'll just put the rubber band around the area that I just want to help keep closed, and just tighten the rubber band down a little bit. And what that's going to do is allow the gases to come out. If it builds up too much in there, it'll just allow it to flex a little bit to let that extra gases out. If you go to a homebrew store or online, you can find these airlocks. Let me see, I have one over here. So this is an airlock, which basically what it means is if you have a container like this on the lid, there's oftentimes a hole where you can just stick this in there. And what will happen is that the gases will come up through the middle and then bubble out from the side. And it's only bubbling out, it's not bubbling in. So it's keeping air out, which is what we want from this fermentation process. So with this, you'll want to just leave it. You can leave it for, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. But what I like suggesting to everyone is to try it. Try it after a week. Try it after 2 weeks. And when it gets to the acidity level, the sourness level that you like, then to slow down that fermentation process and enjoy it at that flavor profile, stick it in the refrigerator.
Okay, so you leave it out.
Yeah.
Out of the refrigerator.
If say we did double the amount of cabbage, that would be basically filling this whole container up. So that would be about 2 kilograms of cabbage in here. You'll want to use just like a slight dish wherever you're going to be holding it, or like letting it ferment. Because if it's really full up, which is great, a lot of cabbage, a lot of sauerkraut, it will end up spilling out a little bit because of the fermentation juices and the liquid and gases that are produced will create a mess if you don't have it contained.
So we actually, David the other day fermented this one. This was done 4 days ago, so it's been sitting out for 4 days. And
it's got my salt sandwich bag.
It's got a lot of liquid in there.
A lot of liquid.
So do you want to try it and see if it's
let's try
the flavor that we want it to be?
Sure.
Okay.
And we actually, off camera, we got some samples.
Yeah.
You'll notice that the sauerkraut is changed colors as well. It went from a green, kind of a vibrant green, a vibrant light green, like that, to something that's a little bit more dull.
A little bit like yellower.
Yellow.
Yeah. Not too sour yet.
Not too sour. And what's giving it the sourness is the acetic acid produced by the bacteria. So the lactobacilli are the bacteria that are producing the acid. It's a byproduct of just what they do and how they do it. The gases are typically produced by yeast, CO2. Both of them kind of come together to be able to create a probiotic environment for themselves.
It's pretty good. I think it's going to definitely get better as it ferments longer because it's not that sour yet. But yeah, it has a good flavor to it. It's pretty salty and flavorful.
After your first batch, I'd recommend doing cumin. That's a good one. Peppers, like peppercorns, it's also a good one. If you're wanting something that tastes like, I don't know, your classic rye bread, or would go really well with rye bread, just adding some caraway seed, that would be good in there too.
Cool.
But yeah, that's fermentation sauerkraut edition. There's a lot, as right at the top of the show, Sarah was talking about all the different kinds of fermentations that occur and different products that are. It's a wide range.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us today and learning how to make sauerkraut with us. And I hope it goes well for you. All right. Take care.